looking, throwing in the end zone.
Montana, touchdown, John Taylor.
Young to the air, Young to Jerry Rice, touchdown San Francisco.
Young stumbles on the way back and fires up the middle. Pass is caught by Owens.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm your host, Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis, plus timely and entertaining sports and pop culture topics. Today is an all 49ers episode, no plus content. We're going to be diving into the defensive coordinator search. We're going to take a brief look at the O-line and a former 49er that San Francisco may reunite with. Some notes on the defense, player being released, the salary cap jumping up to $255 million for 2024. We're going to take a look at some free agents on defense and who San Francisco might decide to bring back, and then conclude by taking a look at defensive cut, restructure, or extension candidates as the 49ers look to get under the salary cap if they are not already, and there are conflicting reports, and obviously freeing up room for a few free agents and their NFL draft class. Like always, it starts with the Niners and it'll end with the Niners today, so let's get right into it.
Let's talk Niners.
So defensive coordinator search is going on 2 weeks as Steve Wilks was let go a couple days after the Super Bowl. And we know now for certain that the 49ers have interviewed former LA Chargers head coach Brandon Staley and an internal candidate, defensive pass game specialist Nick Sorensen. There's at least two more candidates that are going to be interviewed this week. So hopefully, first week of March, there will be a new defensive coordinator for San Francisco. And one of those candidates on the schedule to interview is 49ers defensive backs coach Daniel Bullock and at least two outside candidates. Now, there's at least is important. There's probably going to be 3 or 4 or more outside candidates because of the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule used to only apply to head coaches and general managers, but the past couple of years it's been extended to coordinators as well, mandating that teams interview at least 2 outside minority candidates. And the only outside candidate they've interviewed is Brandon Staley, unless he has some minority ethnicities in him that we don't know of, similar to Mike McDaniel. We had no idea that, what his ethnicities were, but it did net the 49ers a third-round pick when he was hired by the Miami Dolphins to be their head coach. The Bill Belichick, it's not even rumors, it's discussion and hopes. The Pete Carroll discussion and hopes by people are just going to fall by the wayside. I said last podcast, and I will maintain that I can't imagine at their age, early 70s, wanting to take a step back when Bill Belichick still wants to be a head coach. He still wants to break Don Shula's all-time wins record. And last any of us checked, Pete Carroll is still a consultant with the Seahawks. That's not to say he can't resign from that and become a defensive coordinator, a post he held almost 30 years ago in San Francisco in the mid-90s. But I don't think those two are realistic candidates really in any way, shape, or form. Mike Vrabel was thrown about. Again, I don't see that happening. I can see him, again, holding out to be a head coaching candidate. And if they want, listen, I can only imagine the hours that coaches, even coordinators, put in. A year off for people like Carroll and Belichick, who certainly are set for life money-wise. Mike Vrabel, between being a player and a head coach, I'm sure is doing pretty well as well. And there's going to be, better opportunities than being a defensive coordinator. The Cowboys, the Eagles, the Giants, if those teams underperform next year, just in the NFC East alone, in addition to probably 3 to 4 or 5 additional more openings that any one of those candidates can take. But starting with Brandon Staley, he gets a lot of heat. deservedly so. Did not have a good 3 years with the Chargers, only one playoff appearance, a supreme collapse at Jacksonville in that wild card game from 2022. But he started out as the defensive coordinator of the Rams in 2020, their Super Bowl year, and he had a great year. The reason why he was hired as the Chargers head coach. The Rams finished number 1 overall defense, 282 yards allowed, number 1 against the pass, 191 yards allowed, 3rd against the rush, 91 yards allowed, and 1st in points allowed, 18.5. Tough to get much better than that. His 3 years in Los Angeles with the Chargers, not great. His defense overall never ranked higher than 22nd. The pass defense ranked 7th at best. The run defense not better than 17th, and points allowed not better than 22nd. And his last year in Los Angeles, when it sounds like he took over more of the play calling duties on defense, 24th overall, 30th against the pass, 7th against the run, and 24th in points allowed. And yes, he's had his hiccups in being too bold in terms of being a head coach and going for it on 4th down. And Shanahan does not like to blitz all that much. He'd rather rush 4 and drop 7. But as I've detailed in previous podcasts, the defensive line, the pass rush is living up only on its 2019 hype, which maxed out at 48 sacks, which was exactly the same number of sacks that the Niners have had this year in 2023. So if you thought the Niners pass rush was lacking a bit this year, well, statistically, and we're not looking at pressures, I don't have that data at my disposal, and that is a thing, of course, but getting to the quarterback was no better in 2023 than it was in 2019 when it was hailed as a ferocious pass rush. How do I feel about Brandon Staley as a candidate? Not great. He doesn't feel like the huge move the needle candidate that the 49ers could hire. Do I feel better about Brandon Staley than an internal candidate? I actually do. And it feels like the longer this search is going on, the more that it feels like it could be someone outside the building. Because whoever they've interviewed already, Daniel Bullocks, or whoever else they're going to interview in the building this year, I'm sure they interviewed last year before they settled on Steve Wilks. And those candidates last year weren't good enough. What happened this year? How much growth in 1 year as being a pass game specialist coordinator or a defensive backs coach? Are they more prepared now or for 2024 than they would have been for 2023? I'm not in the building. I don't know. Obviously, Shanahan, Lynch, and others have obviously a much better idea than any one of us or any media member stating that they're getting a hint that the defensive coordinator search, there might be a name soon. And all they're talking to are sources. And those are media members and journalists are basing their reporting on a source's best guess, which very well might be based on nothing, might be their best hunch. And that's all it is for me, a best hunch in terms of feeling better about Brandon Staley than I would about an internal candidate. Now, yes, the last 3 years in Los Angeles are disturbing. Brandon Staley may fall in the category of a Steve Spagnuolo, a Wade Phillips, a Norv Turner, coaches that are better coordinators than head coaches. Brandon Staley actually got passed over. In the article I read, I'm not sure if he actually interviewed to be the Rams defensive coordinator for this upcoming season. But regardless, the Rams went with an internal candidate, Chris Shula, I believe, to be their defensive coordinator. I don't know if that actually casts a bad light on Brandon Staley for how dominant the defense was his last season there when they won the Super Bowl versus what the team could be now with a lot of young players and some good young players. But here's what I do know and what we can all agree on. Whatever defense the Chargers put on the field the past 3 years, individual players and collectively, were or are not nearly as talented as what the 49ers are going to put on the field in 2024. And we know the roster isn't fully fleshed out yet. They need a couple defensive tackles, at least 2, if not 3. At least 2 defensive ends. If they're going to have any secondary help, what's going to go on with Dre Greenlaw in terms of his Achilles rehab? How available will he be? What are they going to do at safety? But there's going to be more talent on the 49ers defensive roster than at any point in his Chargers tenure. And you can argue more than what he had in 2020 when he was with the Rams. Yes, he had Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, Jordan Fuller at safety. I'm blanking on, was it Leonard Floyd at defensive end who had a good season. The Niners have just as much, if not more talent collectively on the 2024 team upcoming with draft picks and free agents to be determined than what the Rams had in 2020. Does that mean he could automatically emulate what he did in Los Angeles in 2020? Of course not. But in terms of experience, he obviously called the defense in 2020. He called some of the defense in 2023. And you know he had oversight or hand in the defense in 2021 or 2022, albeit not good. But the Chargers weren't putting out all pros or Pro Bowlers at every level the way the 49ers have and will. So I think Brandon Staley can do a better job than anybody internally. I don't know who else out there. Are they going to pry a Jeff Ulbrich away from the Jets under Robert Saleh, give him a promotion to assistant head coach and D coordinator to run the defense? Is there anyone else on Saleh's staff? Anyone on DeMeco Ryan's staff, as I mentioned last week? But whoever they are, they will be first-time defensive coordinators. And I think Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch in this win-now window, which is, again, why I think Brandon Ayuk is going to come back, and maybe not someone like a Chase Young, and we'll get into that, but they're going to keep the band together to make another run this year, and hopefully in 2025 as well, before Brock Purdy's extension happens and kicks in and becomes onerous for the salary cap. But do you want to turn the defense over to a rookie defensive play caller? Regardless of how long someone's been with Kyle, been with the Niners as a pass game specialist, linebacker coach, defensive back coach, whatever it may be. And Chris Krasoric, defensive line coach, is not going to be the D coordinator. He's already come out and said he does not want that responsibility. He enjoys coaching the D line. I'm fine with that. If they can find another defensive coordinator. Now, if the Niners had decided to move off of Steve Wilks during the season, they could have maybe made a run at Mike Zimmer to come in as a defensive consultant and then hire him and then promote him during the playoffs or something as D coordinator. Zimmer, I believe now, is the D coordinator for the Cowboys. That would have been a good, experienced D coordinator hire, someone who has a ton of experience calling plays. This is going to be a tough sell to me and maybe the fans and maybe to Kyle himself to bring in someone or promote someone internally who has not called defensive plays. Maybe it's not as complicated as I'm making it out to seem in my head because I've never been on an NFL staff, and the vast majority, if not everyone out there listening, has not been on an NFL staff either. But wouldn't you feel comfortable with someone? I could feel comfortable with someone like Brandon Staley, who has coached an Aaron Donald, a Jalen Ramsey, a Leonard Floyd, a Jordan Fuller, Troy Hill, who was the cornerback on the other side, Sebastian Joseph, who the Niners, it's a free agent and may bring back. He can figure out how to put all Pro Bowl pieces together. He's done it with the Rams. And just because he didn't have success with the Chargers doesn't mean he can't have success with this team and this roster. But to Kyle's point, it's not like Steve Wilks did not have success. Outside of pass defense, they were a top, 7 defense across the board. But he felt like that he wasn't putting the team, the players, the scheme, everything in the best possible situation to maximize the talent they have on the roster. Does he think Staley can do that? I don't know. And make no judgments about, well, he interviewed Staley. If he loved him, why didn't he hire him? Well, Rooney Rule, and I'm sure they want to uncover every stone or as many stones as possible. Doesn't matter. They're not going to the combine. They're not making any picks. There's no free agents happening for another 16 days. They have time, and they're still going to run their wide 9 cover 3 system. So they know the types of players that they want, and the scouting department is working on that. I'm sure the D coordinator will have a say, but especially if you're coming in this late, you're not going to have a tremendous say. Long story long, I'd be okay with Brandon Staley. I really would. I'm just curious if they ever release the list of names that interviewed, who else was out there, and could anyone else have been a better fit? Again, win now window. Do you want to turn it over to a rookie play caller? I'm not sure. So let's flip to the offensive side of the ball. And yesterday, left guard Laken Tomlinson was released by the Jets. It saved the Jets over $8 million in cap space. He was with the 49ers from 2017 to 2021. Durable, played every game the last 6 years. He just did turn 32 years old, so not a spring chicken, but could be an important piece. Now, he did not have a great season this past year with the Jets. How he graded out on pass defense and run defense was pass blocking and run blocking was not great. Bottom third of the league. But he was also playing on a Jets line that was bereft of talent everywhere. Plug him next to Trent Williams and Jake Brendel, and it could look a whole lot better. Now, if they entertain this, and I'm not sure if San Francisco would or should, what does that mean for Aaron Banks? He played left guard. Would he move to right guard? I would almost think, do you keep Aaron Banks where he is so he could be a bit protected by Williams and Brendel, even though Banks had a good year, don't get me wrong, but Tomlinson's more experienced. Could he make the transition to right guard and help out McKivitz a bit? If a Tomlinson was in there in the Super Bowl, would there have been that free rusher of Chris Jones that Burford didn't pick up in overtime? We'll never know. But we do know John Feliciano is a free agent. Spencer Burford is a backup. He is not the answer. And Aaron Banks, just mentioned the starting left guard, he's in the final year of his contract. So even if they bring in Laken Tomlinson, that's a short-term fix. They're going to need to bring in a young guard if they can't re-sign Banks, and draft or bring in a young tackle to battle it out with McKivitz and have an eye on the future for when Trent Williams retires. He said he's coming back in 2024, and maybe he'll come back in 2025 as well. Can't bank on anything other than 2024 right now, and you can't even bank on that because, God forbid, anything happens, injuries, training camp, preseason, whatever it may be. But an interesting name, someone that played well for San Francisco. The Niners did the right thing, let him go to the Jets. The contract that he got only lasted 2 years. And the Jets, if they're going to have that bad of a line, you might as well get rid of high-priced veterans if the line's going to be that bad. Blow it up, rebuild with younger, cheaper talent that could perform just as well as Laken Tomlinson did on that line, which was a patchwork mess. Anyway, so a name to keep an eye on. And I'm actually not sure if he could actually sign before the 13th. I think he might be able to. Don't hold me to that. But a name that the Niners might explore if the price is right. Now, John Feliciano only cost $2.5 million on a one-year deal. That's probably around what they would offer Tomlinson. Feliciano can play center as well. Did get hurt in the Super Bowl. I'm not sure how serious that is. Hopefully that was just something minor. But at least another name out there. And look, if Tomlinson can get $5, $6, $7 million a year from another team, it could be his last contract. He's probably going to chase the money. He's been to a Super Bowl. I don't know how important a Super Bowl win for him is at this point, but coming off of 2 terrible years with the Jets, cashing a paycheck on another bad team might not be all that appealing. But stay tuned. Flip it to defense again. So second team All-Pro cornerback Charvarius Ward last week had core muscle surgery. He has been sharing his rehab on whether it was Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok. I don't recall. Pro Bowler this year, second team All-Pro, as I mentioned, had a really good season, 72 tackles, 1 forced fumble, 5 interceptions, and 1 touchdown. Showed that he played through an injury. This wasn't something that developed in the Super Bowl or playoffs. It's something that he was playing with for at least a month or two. Knew that it was a special team, that they had a special opportunity to get to the Super Bowl, which they did. Unfortunately, they didn't close the deal. But players like Ward, like Armstead with the knee meniscus tear and the plantar fasciitis in his foot, and Javon Hargrave with the torn thumb ligament, playing through injuries to make that Super Bowl run. And Ward, obviously, being a second-team All-Pro, had a very good season. Pro Football Focus, his overall grade was an 84.7, which is 5th among corners, and in coverage, 86.5, 3rd among cornerbacks. So he's on the mend, nothing significant, but noteworthy to discuss, and we'll see in 2024 who's going to be his running mate. Ambry Thomas is in the final year of his contract, so is Diamador Lenore. Does Darrell Luter get a look at outside cornerback with Ward? Do they draft someone? Is there a free agent? And Ward is only locked in for 1 more season. So we'll see if they work out an extension with Ward in the coming weeks. Now, a cornerback who is not going to be on the team is Isaiah Oliver. His starting slot tenure only lasted the first couple of games. Then he was taken out. The release saves the 49ers $2.4 million on the salary cap. He was a Steve Wilkes guy. And it's not, he wasn't let go because he's a Steve Wilkes guy and they had any sort of vendetta against guys Wilkes liked. He didn't work out. Was brought in as a bigger slot, 6 feet tall. Did not show the fluidity, being able to stay with slot receivers. Good tackler. Should have been someone that could have, matched up with tight ends more, but fell out of favor very quickly once the game started. And Diamador Lenore, who started the first couple weeks at outside corner, moved into the slot, as you know, forcing Ambry Thomas outside as the boundary corner. So $2.4 million, not a ton of savings, but every little bit is going to help. Even though the salary cap was raised to $255.4 million, it's $10 million more than what was anticipated in league circles, and $30 million more than this past year in 2023. And depending on where you look, the 49ers salary cap space fluctuates. 2 very, very, very reputable sites, overthecap.com, has the Niners currently over the cap by $5 million, And Spotrac, another very reputable site, has the Niners under the cap by $6 million. Let's average that out and to say that the Niners have no salary cap room right now. I've even read articles that they have $2.5 million of salary cap. I'm not sure where they're pulling that from. In the offseason, only the top 51 count towards the salary cap. Once the season starts, it's your top 53. That's, 2-player difference does not represent an $11 million difference between these 2 websites, because those 2 players are probably making about $850,000 between them. So let's, for the purposes of this discussion, just assume that the 49ers have 0 cap space. And now let's look at who they have on defense as free agents and what they were making in 2023. Chase Young, defensive end, $8.6 million. Niners only picked up a couple million of that during the trade. Cleveland Farrell, who ended the season on IR after a Week 16 injury, $2.5 million. Randy Gregory at the end, $14 million, but when he was traded, that deal was basically void and the Niners only owed him about $1 million. Chase Young, as you know, with the Niners, played 9 games, had 2.5 sacks, 1 sack in the playoffs. That was in the Super Bowl. Cleveland Farrell, 16 games, 3.5 sacks, and Randy Gregory, 12 games, 2.5 sacks. I think Chase Young, even though Nick Bosa wants him back, as he should, teammate, Ohio State teammate, someone I'm sure Nick Bosa likes, and I'm sure a lot of the players on the team like, and some of the coaches as well. Chase Young's going to price himself out, even if it's an $8.6 million deal, 1-year deal, similar to what his average annual value was in 2023. That's going to price him out. Cleveland Farrell at $2.5 million, a Randy Gregory around the same price makes more sense to me. Does that mean they bring them both back? No, I could see them bringing back one of the 2. Farrell a little bit younger. They have obviously on the team Nick that got playing time this year. Nick Bosa, Drake Jackson coming off of a knee injury, and Robert Beal. I would sign one of Farrell and Gregory, maybe with low guaranteed amount. Say Farrell gets the same deal, $2.5 million, maybe $500,000 of that is guaranteed. So if they cut him and they sign someone else, it's not a huge hit. They're only going to keep 5 defensive ends at the most, and you have 3 on your roster that are going to make the team: Bosa, Jackson, and Beal. Good chance they're going to draft one. They brought in other free agents that they signed. Austin Bryant being one of them, Ernest Brown. I'm not saying that these are players that are going to make the team. Austin Bryant was on the practice squad. Ernest Brown was a practice squad player last year as well for a different team. But it's going to be competition, and the Niners are going to keep the best 5. Doesn't mean they're going to stop adding to it. And I think keeping a Farrell or Gregory, and if they want to sign both, because you got to get to 90 players, right, for your training camp roster with low guaranteed money, I would be okay with that. But also some fresh blood somewhere, whether free agent or the draft, I think would help to see if they can really find that starter opposite Bosa, because they really don't have it yet. At defensive tackle, free agents are Javon Kinlaw, $3.9 million last year. Sebastian Joseph, $2.7, but that was prorated since he came in late in the season. Kevin Givens, $2.1 million on the roster. Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, and Kalia Davis, who will be in his 3rd year, who's battled injuries his first 2 years. He's not guaranteed a roster spot. Again, it's a position that they're going to keep 5 at the most. Of the 3 free agents, Kinlaw, Givens, and Sebastian Joseph, I would probably keep Sebastian Joseph. And again, if they can get him less than that 2.7 that he made last year, I think that'd be fantastic. I think they definitely draft a defensive tackle. This is a team that builds from the lines outward. So you can definitely anticipate a lineman or 2 on offense being drafted, and at least one defensive tackle, maybe another. And we'll see if they go outside in free agency to bring someone in. Again, Armstead, Hargrave, and Kalia Davis, but really Armstead and Hargrave are going to be the only 2 on the definitely are locked. And I'm going to talk more about Eric Armstead in a little bit on the team for 2024. At linebacker, Oren Burks, $2.5 million. Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, $1.9 million. On the roster, Warner, Greenlaw, D. Winters, and Jalen Graham. They're going to keep 5 or 6 at the most. I think both linebackers, they just let walk. I think for what Burks provided and Demetrius Flanagan-Fowles, especially at $1.9 million, they can get a vet minimum or even a rookie to be that 4th linebacker. And I would expect that the Niners are expecting D. Winters and Jalen Graham to take a step up. And one of those 2 players could be either the starting linebacker as Greenlaw is rehabbing and coming back from the Achilles, or when he's healthy, the 4th linebacker. So I think they can go cheaper than Burks or Flanagan-Fowles, either in free agency or certainly in the draft. And remember, they do have Curtis Robinson on the practice squad, that if he's your 5th linebacker, I'm okay with that. I think it's only counting a little over $1 million against the cap, and it's non-guaranteed. Totally fine. I mean, we're not going to, they're not bringing in Azeez Al-Shire, guys. They're not going to be spending whatever it's going to take to get him, for him to either start the first month or 2 of the season and then be relegated to the 3rd linebacker. Or even if Greenlaw can't make it back, they still have to take on Greenlaw's salary, Warner's, and Aziz's, and everyone's going to be making over like $8 million a year, or at least say $5 or $6 million. No way. That's a poor allocation of resources. Not going to happen. If a veteran linebacker gets released as teams are purging to get under the salary cap, they can get for under $2 million or around 1.5 on a 1-year deal. Absolutely. But I think the team has some comfort and confidence level in Winters and Graham, and they drafted the 2 players knowing that Burks and Flanagan-Fowles were free agents this year, and also knowing or keeping an eye on 2025, because this is the last year that Dre Greenlaw is under contract and coming off an Achilles tear. It's not a guarantee that he gets re-signed. Again, allocation of resources. Do you want to have 2 high-priced linebackers? I don't know. And cornerback safeties, Logan Ryan, $1.2 million, again, prorated. He came in late into the season. Terrence Mitchell at corner did not actually see what his salary amount was. This is a team that'll keep 5 or 6 corners and 3 or 4 safeties on the roster now. Charvarius Ward, Ambry Thomas, and Diamador Lenore, all in their final year of their contract in 2024. The other 2 corners on the roster, Samuel Womack, 2 years left, Darrell Luther, 3 years left. At safety, Hufanga, last year of his contract in 2024, coming off the ACL. Jair Brown, who they drafted, 3 more years, and the last year for George Odom, who's strictly a backup. I don't think they bring back Logan Ryan or Terrence Mitchell. I think safety could be looked at in the draft, as could corner, and potentially in free agency. I think keeping 5 corners on the roster with 2 on the practice squad is fine. And I think 4 safeties, makes sense, especially if someone like a Jair Brown can maybe drop down and cover a 4th receiver who's out there. I don't think that's Hufanga's strength, especially coming off a major knee injury, or George Odom's as well. And I think maybe drafting a safety would make sense even in the 2nd or 3rd round, because again, guys, you can't pay everybody. And even though they're not putting a lot of money in the safety position at the moment, you can't pay everyone. And what Talanoa Hufanga may command, especially if he bounces back and has a Pro Bowl or second-team All-Pro type season, he may price himself out. So then you need to replace him. Drafting a safety to get that red shirt year, so to speak, to learn would put them in better shape for 2025 if Hufanga walks. Now, defensive. So those are the free agents. Of everybody I mentioned, I think either one of or both, if there's low guaranteed money, defensive end, Cleveland Farrell and Randy Gregory. Sebastian Joseph, I think, would be a decent veteran bring back, but they got to get younger on the defensive line. Armstead and Hargrave are over 30. Sebastian Joseph, if he comes back, he's 28. Kali Davis is young, but he's often injured. And cornerbacks, they have 3 that are in the last year of their contract, but we're going to talk about possibly an extension for 1 that could even help the salary cap out. But let's talk about making more room, salary cap space. So let's talk about potential cuts, restructures, or extension candidates. And the first being Eric Armstead. Now, guys, I don't think they're going to cut him, but let's just talk about the numbers. He is a $28.6 million cap hit in 2024, the 3rd highest on the team. For his production that we're going to get into and his availability, that is way too high. Trent Williams is the number 1 cap hit. Left tackle, we'll miss a game or 2 a year, but left tackle super important. Obviously, Debo, the number 2 cap hit, and we can obviously argue his importance to the team, but you saw when both of those guys were out, they lost 3 straight games. Armstead played 9 games in 2022, no sacks. Played 12 games this year, battling 2 injuries, 5 sacks. He's been in the league for 9 years, 33.5 sacks total. And yes, I know QB pressures are a thing as well, pushing the pocket. I do not subscribe to Pro Football Focus, so I do not have those stats. I'm just going off of what is available to me. 33.5 in 9 years is 3.7 sacks a year. His career year was 2019, playing next to Buckner and Dee Ford and Nick Bosa as a rookie, where he had 10 sacks. That led to his large contract, and that also led to the trade of DeForest Buckner to the Colts and the drafting of Javon Hargrave. Oops, and oops. He's never had more than 6 sacks in a season. Since 2019, his sack count is 3.5, 6, 0, and 5. Mentioned battle through the knee meniscus tear. Did not want to go on IR. Wanted to be there for the playoff run, which he was, and the Super Bowl. The plantar fasciitis, the knee meniscus will get repaired. The plantar fasciitis, I have to look into this more. I don't know how much that is a chronic injury that just has to be dealt with and managed with rest and rehab versus if there's anything surgical that can be done to repair it. But Armstead's going to be 31 this season. And I know they're not going to cut him. They're not. He's still valuable. He's still impactful. He's been a multi-Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee. Good dude, great locker room dude in the community. And again, valuable, but not to the tune of $28.6 million on a cap hit. if he gets designated a June 1 cut, and he won't, San Francisco saves $18 million, which means they'd be on the hook for $10 million. But they need to work with him, and they should not extend him. Again, 31 years old. Hargrave's 31 as well. Knee, meniscus, we don't want to call it a knee issue, but you're getting older. Knee, foot, lower body extremities. These players and joints are not aging like wine or cheese. These can become chronic things. His cap hit needs to be cut in close to or more than half. If releasing Armstead means the Niners would be on the hook for $10 million, then to me, and granted, I'm not negotiating this, that's around what his cap hit should be for staying on the team. Because one, if he gets released, obviously no one's going to give him around $10 million a year. I highly doubt. Or if they give him a multi-year deal, of course, year one would be a very, very low cap hit and then would balloon and get disgusting in year 2 or 3 or 4 if we were to get a 4-year deal, which I highly, highly, highly doubt. But this is how I'm looking at things. If the dead cap hit is $10 million for you to not be on the team, then that's what it should be. And go to half. Go to $14 million. I could live with a $14 million cap hit for Eric Armstead. He plays about 65% of the snaps. Now, someone like a Warner, Fred Warner, worth it, plays all the snaps. Charvarius Ward, Diamador Lenore, your safeties generally play all the snaps. When you get to the D-line, and as important as the D-line is, Bosa plays about 80, 85, sometimes 90% of the snaps just because he's so good and they can't afford to take him out. But when you're talking about the interior, even Hargrave plays about 60, 65% of the snaps. Do you want to pay that much money and have that big of a cap hit on 2 30-plus-year-old defensive tackles? My answer is no. If you can lower the cap hit for Armstead, he stays. And I think he's going to stay no matter what. They just have to talk to reworking his deal. Do not extend him. They can free up money by extending him. They should not extend him. Let him play. This year will be his 10th year. And if they can rework the contract where next year's cap hit is along the lines of this year's as well, they would be in great shape. Javon Hargrave, there's a distinct possibility that this is his last year in San Francisco. This contract was built in such a way that if they release him after next season, a post-June 1st cap cut, they can save 3/4 of his salary. But I think Armstead's going to be back. It just cannot be at that number. His play, his age, and his injury history does not justify it. And I'm hoping they can come to some sort of an agreement that he's not forced to be released. Because that is, I don't think they're going to do it, but it's a possibility. It is an option on the table. Dre Greenlaw. Do I think he's getting cut? No. No, I do not. But he is a $9.6 million cap hit this year, where it is possible that he misses a good portion of the season. I don't think he'll miss all season unless there's some sort of major obstacles or setback in his rehab, which basically just started a week ago. To me, and I know if you've been on Twitter, you've seen, report that an orthopedic surgeon says 6 months is a very realistic amount of time for him to come back. So he had surgery mid-February. I'm going to count on my fingers like a child. To mid-March, mid-April, mid-May, mid-June, mid-July, mid-August is 6 months. The season starts beginning of September. That will be close to 7 months. Yes, there's the possibility that he could be back. I think it's safer if the 49ers and us as fans plan for him to miss time, right? You'd rather be conservative and get a pleasant surprise versus banking on something and be disappointed. So I think starting off on the PUP list, missing the first 4 to 6 weeks is reasonable. So you need someone to be that number 2 linebacker. Again, Winters, Jalen Graham, Curtis Robinson, a draft pick, a free agent. They're going to have options. It's not going to be the end of the world for the Niners defense. But it is the last year of Dre Greenlaw's contract. They are not going to cut him, but let's just go over the numbers. A post-June 1st cut saves San Francisco $8.6 million of that $9.6 million. They are not going to cut him. They are not going to cut him. Do they think they can maybe extend him on the cheap because he's coming off this injury? Maybe. And that, would it, I don't want to say shock me, but would it be the dumbest idea in the world for Lynch or Parag Marath to sit down with his agent saying, hey, we want to extend Greenlaw another $5 or $6 million a year for the next 3 years. And his agent may say, hey, we don't know what the heck's going to happen with the Achilles. Dre, you should take it. Then, you're set for life. If you're smart and don't open, 5 restaurants and 3 car dealerships and buy 3 boats and all that stupid shit, 17 gold necklaces that athletes tend to buy. But it's a discussion that could be had, right? Maybe there's an injury out that if he doesn't bounce back or something happens career ending, that Dre gets some sort of payout, but the Niners also save some money. They build that into contracts all the time. But let's say, or his agent could say, and Dre could say, no, man, I want to bet on myself. I want to come back healthy. I want to make a Super Bowl run. I want to show everyone that I'm one of the best linebackers in the league and get that Fred Warner-like payday. Obviously, that's a possibility. People bet on themselves all the time. Aaron Judge and the Yankees, right? Had that MVP season, 60, however many, 61, whatever it was, 2 home runs, AL MVP. But now if you're the Niners, you have to think, you don't want to lose Greenlaw. You can't help it though, right? But are you really going to extend Greenlaw if he's healthy and has a great year at the end of 2024 to what he wants and have 2 super high-priced linebackers? No. I don't want 2 super high-priced D tackles. I don't want 2 super high-priced corners or linebackers or DNs. As nice as it sounds, once you do that, you are making multiple sacrifices elsewhere on your roster. Having a great tackle at left tackle, a great DN like Bosa, a great linebacker, a great corner, hopefully a great safety if Hufanga bounces back or if Jair Brown develops into that. Where I would pay the money, honestly, is 2 stud receivers. It's a passing league, right? What's Joe Burrow going to look like if T. Higgins is gone or Jamar Chase leaves or without Tyler Boyd? What's Dak Prescott going to look like if both CeeDee Lamb and say Brandon Cooks aren't there or Michael Gallup, even though Michael Gallup isn't a great receiver? The receivers in Shanahan's offense make the difference, can make a huge difference plus they're complementary. Think about what Ayuk does well versus what Debo does well. I'm okay paying for that. And just because you pay for it today doesn't mean you have to pay for it next year or the year after. Especially with Debo, as Debo gets further into his contract, you can release him. As Warner, and save money, as Warner gets further into his contract, you can release him. They won't. We're going to get to him in a minute. But once you sign Greenlaw, that first year may be low, but then it's going to start to balloon the same time that Warner's is going to balloon. And then what are you going to do? I'm okay having one very, very good player at each position, but not doubling up other than receiver, because in this offensively skewed league, I'd rather have more talent at the receiver position than less. That's just me. That's how I build a team. But I don't think Greenlaw is going anywhere. Can they do something to the contract to lower that cap hit and still keep him on a 1-year deal in 2024? Maybe. I don't know what they would recommend. Or they can extend him on the cheap. Or, again, they let him play it out. They're not able to re-sign him. He's healthy. He signs a big free agent deal somewhere else, and they get either a 3rd or 4th round compensatory pick for him in 2025, 2026, whenever it would come in. Next, Fred Warner, $24.5 million cap hit. 4th highest on the team. Worth it. Best linebacker in the NFL. He's under contract through 2026. So, meaning through the 2025 season. 2024, 2025, then he's a free agent. His age 30 season. I think he's someone that should, if he's not going to retire a Niner, because someone like Bobby Wagner did not retire a Seahawk. He left, went to the Rams, obviously came back. It's unreasonable to think anyone outside of really a Ray Lewis. And I'm not saying Fred Warner is so far off of, Ray Lewis's, career trajectory, even though Ray Lewis is a Hall of Famer and Fred Warner still has more to do to potentially get there. I think you can maybe extend him for 2 more years through age 32, and an extension could free up as much as $11.4 million. Doesn't mean it's going to be all $11.4 million. The Niners can figure out how they want to allocate that across the years, but they could free up, let's say, between $7 and $10 million. That would help. I think Fred Warner is an extension candidate. I think Charvarius Ward is an extension candidate, and I apologize, I do not have the cap savings number with me, but it's going to be at least $7 or $8 million in savings. Now, Charvarius Ward, I think, is 28 or 29, so if you want to extend him for 2 or 3 years at something reasonable, that will bring his cap number down again, say $7 or $8 million. You could extend Deommodore Lenoir, but there's no real savings to be had there. I don't want to extend Ambry Thomas. Let's move past that. Lenoir, I think, could be a very good number 2 cornerback. But what is that going to cost if you make the decision to extend Ward? Because obviously, Pro Bowl, second team All-Pro, he has the salary that an extension can manipulate and bring down. So that is a possibility as well. Just restructuring contracts, you're going to fall into the pit that the Saints are in. And the Saints, are releasing players. They restructured quarterback Carr's contract recently, Derek Carr, to free up about $23 million. You can finagle stuff, but at some point the bill's going to come due, and that may mean releasing good, high-priced, still young players or trading them because you can't afford to round out your roster the way that you want to. There are savings to be had on the offensive side. I went over that last podcast. There are certainly savings to be had on the defensive side. Extending Warner, extending Ward, discussion with Greenlaw, and that could be an extension as well. Again, coming off the ACL, tricky, and doing something with Eric Armstead. I would not do an extension. They need to get younger at defensive tackle. He is still valuable, and to me, I think he's still valuable this year and into next year as well. But he's going to miss time, and he's going to probably max out at 5 or 6 sacks. I just don't think, again, that is not worth $28.5 million of a cap hit. And as I mentioned before, you just have to talk about what are you doing after this year at corner with Lenoir. He's making $3.2 million this year. What are you going to do at safety? Hufunga's making $4.9 million this year. Those 2 players would certainly, if they have another build-upon season, they're going to be making more than what they're currently earning. It's going to be tough paying everybody. Actually, not tough. It's impossible to pay everybody you want to keep what they're worth. This is why the Niners need to start hitting on draft picks. No more Trey Sermons or Ty Davis Price. I mean, you got your kicker, and I know people didn't like Jake Moody in the 3rd round. Hopefully Cam Latu turns into something at tight end. Hopefully one of these linebackers, Graham or Winters, turns into something. Kalia Davis, even though I think he was a 5th or 6th round draft pick, they haven't hit at D tackle. They certainly didn't with Javon Kinlaw. It's a good problem to have when you're hitting on an Ayuk, and a Warner, and a Kittle, and a Debo, and obviously other players that they've drafted as well, but you just can't pay, and Bosa, of course, and you just can't pay everybody. So we have still 16 days till free agency kicks off. I'm sure there will have to be additional moves that Lynch, Morath, and others make to whether they're, what were the numbers I said? Over the salary cap by $5 million or under by 6, over by 5 or under by 6. I don't know what that official number is. I don't know, but hopefully there will be more clarity in the days to come until we speak again next week. Hopefully there'll be a defensive coordinator. But that's going to conclude, obviously, the podcast for this week. If a D coordinator is hired early on in the week, I may jump on for another podcast, but it doesn't sound like that is going to happen. It probably won't be announced till end of week or the weekend, and we'll definitely have our next podcast Tuesday or Wednesday at the absolute latest. But until then, if you're living in the Northeast, the weather is warming up a bit. Get outside, enjoy, exercise, Do something, sports, biking, hiking, whatever it may be. And if you live someplace warmer than the Northeast, I hate you. But until we speak again, everyone stay happy, healthy, and safe. And we will talk soon. Take care.